Hey peeps, this is Ferny, your resident psychic, medium, and spiritual teacher, and you're listening to Ferny Unfiltered, where we dive into topics that enlighten, inform, and entertain the soul. So I wanted to give you guys more feedback or more information because what you just heard, that was actually the video, the Sylvia Browne video on my website, on my YouTube channel that I did last week. And I thought, you know what, this podcast would be a perfect reason to go ahead and share that video clip, or that clip, since you're listening and not watching it. You want to watch the video clip, it's pretty cool too. Just head over to my YouTube channel. But I wanted to give you guys more about my take on this and some of my own predictions and some of my own not just predictions, because I don't like to use the word just predictions, but my own forecast for what's to come in the next year, 2, 3 years. Because as this has continued to progress, and as I have been doing more readings and all of this, I'm starting to have these impressions coming up about different things going on that might be useful to know about, or might be helpful to be able to share. So I'm going to go over, I spent a little while writing these all down, because these have kind of come into my mind over the last several days, and actually over the last 2 weeks. So some of this information has been trickling into my psyche over the last couple of weeks, and I've been writing them all down, trying to keep track of all of them. But I just want to share what I have so far, as what I'm sensing or what I feel is going to be occurring. So one of the things that I was talking to my friend about was, I was telling her about the stock market and how there was going to be a change in the way that the stock market was run, which in essence, in my opinion, in Sylvia Browne's predictions, he said that this would be the end of the stock market. To some extent, I would say I agree, but not in the same way that she is saying, where there's going to be nothing. For me, what I was seeing as far as the stock market is concerned is I do feel there is going to continue to be drops with the stock market, where we might start to see numbers that are, as low as 30 to 40% of what the value of the market was before all this started. I talked to my financial advisor a few weeks ago, and he said, he because the market was going down, it was cheaper, and if people wanted to buy in, even at that stage, it wasn't a bad idea, because you would see growth there from a financial standpoint. This is awful. A lot of people say, well, you're talking about the stock market. This is a pandemic. I don't want you guys to have this idea that I don't care about the pandemic and how people are. I've already talked about that. What I'm talking about now is the other things, the other stuff that may come through or start to occur because of all of this. But, when we were talking about the stock market, if you're someone who has money to burn, now would be a time for you to invest in the market, because it's going lower and it's going down, and it's going to come back at some point. We don't know how long. There is no idea how long this is going to affect the market as far as its growth and getting back to a place where it was. We already know hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses may no longer be after this is all said and done. And companies that we're used to seeing, companies that we're used to having products from, may no longer be able to operate. So I think that this is going to reshape the whole market and the buyer and consumer market. I think this is going to have a huge impact on that. But with the stock market, what I was telling him was, it's at a 20% drop. I'm thinking this is probably going to drop down to 30 to 40%, because I feel like it's going to go much lower. So it definitely could go as low as that, if not lower. But I'm getting that whole 30 to 40% vibe thing. But something else that I was seeing around the market was that after this is all said and done, that the government was going to introduce a kind of insurance policy or insurance plan around the market system. And essentially, it kind of is based around the value of, the way the current currency value system is, where the government has, so much gold or so much reserves in these products or these things that hold value. And so when you have a dollar bill, that dollar bill is meaningless, it's worthless, but it's a promissory note that says, by having this dollar bill, you own, a percentage, or you are bought into the currency system. So it's a guarantee. It's almost like a guaranteed note from the government that this is worth something, and they've got their stockpile of gold somewhere, and God knows what else. So because this whole situation with the virus and the market going down so quickly is going to spook a lot of people who are going to want to invest in the future. What I was seeing the government doing was I saw them creating this insurance plan where instead of you buying them into the market directly, you would buy in through their system, this program. And by buying into this program, it promises you a certain percentage value. So for example, like if you go to a regular bank and if you have enough money, let's say if you and you'll notice this because for some of you who don't even pay attention when you go to the bank, there's a little notice there that says your money is guaranteed or it's protected or it's insured up to $250,000. So if you have $50 in the bank and the banks fail, the government's going to guarantee that it's going to give you $50,000 back or $50 back or whatever. So it's you're insured up to $250,000, and then after that, that's all you. So if you have $1 million in a bank account and the bank fails and they lose your money, the government, based off of the system that they have in place now, they're going to guarantee your money up to $250,000. After that, that's on you, but they will guarantee it to a certain amount. So I feel that they're going to do the same thing with the stock market, where they're going to have this program that you buy into. So instead of taking the risk directly with the market itself, they are kind of the mediator, and you basically are buying from them, and they're ensuring that the value that you buy into is going to have a percentage amount. Now, I don't know all the specifics of this program because this is just an insight or a psychic like vibe that I have, but I was seeing something like that, and that was going to help people who had money to invest have enough faith in the system to buy back into it so that they don't lose what they may have lost this time around. Or people who've never been in the stock market or never invested, they're going to see this and say, I'm not going to put my money in the market. They're going to take all my damn money and it's going to go down the tubes as soon as the market fails. And I ain't trying to repeat 2020. So this is their way of saying, hey, don't worry, you don't have to buy into the system. And if you put in so much, we're going to guarantee you this percentage back. So it's kind of like helping the consumer confidence for the market. So I don't think it's going to be the end of the stock market, but I do think that the stock market itself is pretty much going to become like a national institution where it's going to be based around other things and it won't be so much of what it is right now. So it's the same issue that happened with the banks and with a lot of these companies during the 2008-2009 recession. So, or all of that drama. So this is kind of their way of helping the system to recover. Another thing I was seeing is that tech was going to get set back by like 1 to 3 years because a lot of the things that these companies are used to rolling out, they just weren't going to be able to manufacture or produce quickly enough or in complexity because of the system being completely broken right now with where everything's coming from. So most tech companies, they tend to plan out like 1 to 3 years in advance for what they're rolling out. I mean, some of the companies, Apple, they're like 3-4 years already thinking about 3 or 4 years down the road as far as what they're working on. So what companies like that are going to run into is some of the products that they're used to producing, because they rely on a global economy to produce some of those complex components. They're just not going to be able to do so, but they still need to continue to have products rolling out in order to meet some sort of demand, in order for them to support and sustain the supply chain for their companies. So some of these companies that are used to producing like the most complex, technologically advanced product every single year, or every single like 3 or 4 years if you're Apple, but every single year, what you're going to find is that these companies are going to be rolling out much simpler products, and the cost is going to change as well. And so it's going to feel really different for a little while. And it's just because they're going to continue to produce things that meet the demand or meet the need of whatever. So some of these older phones, like some of us who have the latest model iPhone or the latest model Samsung or whatever, those phones are going to become more valuable because they're going to be harder to get a hold of, because there aren't going to be continuing continuing supplies for those products. I'm not saying that they're going to run completely out. They're just going to run so short that it's going to be hard to maintain that same level of technological advancement. So I feel that this whole thing is going to set back the tech world for 1 to 3 years. Not only that, but I also think that, like I said, what they sell for a little while might be a more stripped down version of stuff that we're used to. But also we're going to notice that there's going to be a huge, in the next few weeks, we may notice a huge change with tech where you're actually seeing like sellouts everywhere of computers, of iPads, of phones, etc. Because so many companies and so many of the workforce is switching gears and they're going into work from home. Some of them are probably not going to be giving people the technology that they already have. They're probably going to be creating or ordering new technology and sending it to people's homes or whatever. Like a lot of different strategies are going to come into play here, but a lot of companies are going to start buying out huge inventories of technology. You're going to have people who are forced to have to work from home for their businesses start to buy the technology necessary to maintain the support levels so that they can continue to keep their businesses running. So I feel like there's going to be a run on technology. So we may actually start to see a lot of shortages on technology as well over the next few months. And not only that, but also people who are going to be at home are going to realize that they don't really want to back it up for a second. The supply chain changes, all the stuff with the food, all the stuff with the thing. I think we're going to hit the peak of that by the end of this month or going into April. So I think that a lot of the crazy supply shortages that we're already encountering, I think that once we get into April, it's actually going to get a little worse. I don't want to underplay it. I feel like it's going to get a lot worse because I think that the logistics are just not going to be able to be sustained. And not only that, but a lot of what's still coming into stores is based on warehouses that were full with products that were shipped and had been sitting there for a bit. So now that those products aren't being shipped or coming over, a lot of these places are no longer going to have what you need. And so the supply chain is going to hit its peak. And you're going to notice that there's just some of the more basic supplies that are still going to be produced or still be rolling into stores because some of these other ones that are more complex or that whatever, they're just not going to be able to maintain that. So I think we're still going to hit our supply chain pressure peak by the end of this month going into April. I also think that, and what I was saying earlier is that I think that a lot of companies, after this is all said and done, are no longer going to want to have their offices or no longer going to want to have their staff and their organizations based out of places that require a lot of overhead. So some of these companies that before depended on an office to get everything done are going to find out, hey, it is so much cheaper to just run everything from home. Why do we need to pay, several thousands of dollars, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars each month for places that we really could save the money on and use towards more labor, more people, more hires, growing the business, investing in the business, etc. So a lot of companies, I think, are going to start switching gears and closing down their offices after this is said and done, and people can go back to an office. And they're going to see that there's money that can be made, and there's they can advance themselves by just saving on those dollars. Starbucks did the same thing back in 2008, 2009. That's probably when the glory days of Starbucks ended, is because of what happened in 2008, 2009. Because before that, we used to have extra supplies because we didn't want to run out. We used to have extra staff because we didn't want customers to have to deal with long lines or have to deal with not having their orders quickly enough and not enough people to give breaks and etc. So the company ran very differently back then. And then once we hit that 2008, 2009, the company was trying to survive without laying off a massive amount of people. And they decided to just trim as much as they could. So they forced us to work with less people on the floor. They forced us to cut our labor down, to cut our supply usage down, to cut, waste. Any waste, cut it, trim the fat. And after the crisis was over back then, the financial markets recovered. Starbucks said, you know what? We saved millions and millions of dollars doing this. Let's just keep doing it. And so then we started operating lean in a lean way, which changed the entire methodology behind the company itself. I feel that's when Starbucks really died, is back in 2008, 2009. Since then, it's just been another chain organization, in my opinion, that's trying to compete with other companies. Yeah, they do a lot of good stuff behind the scenes, and there are a lot of great people who work for the company. But as a whole, I think that's when, Starbucks went into its decline as the purveyor of the coffee experience, in my opinion. And that's just because I work there. But that's what I think is going to happen with a lot of these companies. They're just not going to want to put people back in offices that they have to pay for. And also people who are going to like working from home or enjoy it are going to be big proponents of it as well, because that in itself is basically saying, hey, why do I have to get up and get on the road for an hour when I can just get out of bed and save that hour to do exercises, to have better quality of life? You're going to have a lot of people who are going to prefer working from home. I'm not saying everybody's going to be working from home when this is all said and done. I just said some people. But there's a lot of people who are going to want this as well. So I think we're going to see a whole shift in that model as well, that work model. I also think that company staying, let's see, I wrote it all down, so I'm going over what I wrote here. Company staying home base, office building. Yeah, and I think that's also going to increase in my opinion, the housing market and the commercial property market is going to change and take a big hit, specifically the commercial property market, real estate market, because I don't think it was prepared for this at all. And I mean, it's all individuals, people who are running their own businesses and development companies, etc. So you have all of these people who are just no longer going to have their spaces. They're not going to use them anymore. And it's going to put a huge crunch on that market. And it's going to be harder to maintain like certain levels in certain areas of town. So what was probably $1 million to rent out a space in one side of town, when this is all said and done, that may come down to $500,000, $500,000, and not $1 million, because I really think that is going to take a big hit. The housing market might not do as badly, but I do think that the houses or the properties inner cities are going to suffer the most versus the properties in the outer cities. I think the properties in the outer parts of the cities are going to see an uptick in purchases and buys, because people who have gone through this, who are going to see how much craziness was going on, are going to want to move out to the outskirts. People who are going to feel like, I need space because if I'm stuck in a room, I can't handle this. I think that you're going to see a lot of people moving to the suburbs and moving to areas outside of main city centers that have acreage and have land. So properties that are acreage and land based are going to be popping. So if you are a real estate agent, you might want to start to look into that, because if you want to weather this as best as you can and not fight up against every other real estate agent that's trying to get leads as well in the aggressive market after this is said and done, I think that's a good bet for you. I also think that, and I hate to say this, and when I look at the future, I try to see the good and the bad, right? I'm not trying to say all good, all bad. I'm not going to act like this is the apocalypse, because I honestly do not think this is the end of the world. But I do think that a lot is changing, and it fundamentally pushing us to live differently, to examine ourselves as a human species globally, and to also realize that we are not in this alone, and we need each other. If we don't have each other, then there's a lot that can go, we can struggle a lot more. So for us to turn against each other is probably not the best idea, because we're going to need each other at some point. Suicide rates might go higher, and that's what I was going to say. I think that we're going to start hearing in the news about just people killing themselves and suicide rates going higher within like a month or two of this going on. And I think for two reasons: people who are not used to the level of social distancing or the level of contemplation, people who can't deal with themselves or can't deal with being alone for that much time, I think are just not going to handle this well. And I think that we're going to start hearing about people who are just not going to wait it out and start killing themselves. And I wish that were not the case. I am seeing that. I wish that was not the case. And it may not even be something that's made public, but you may start to hear about these kinds of situations through the chains, because you're going to have people who are not going to know when this is going to end. They have no clue how long this is going to go on. And just the idea of this going on for at least a month or two, if even a year, I mean, that's a lot of time to be dealing with a situation like this. You have to remember that during World War II, you you had millions of people in prisons who were forced into situations that were just horrendous, and they were there for years. And if they didn't die from the pain and the trauma and the suffering that they were going through, then they were gassed or they were exterminated in another way. But people were imprisoned. And so now here we're in a completely different age, completely different world. But yet we still have the same types of conditions. We still have the same issues and the challenges that go along with that. So younger people, especially I think younger people or people who suffer from a lot of social, a lot of emotional disorders and challenges, I think are going to struggle the most. And this is where this might start to peak or pop up here as well. So I do think that we are going to start hearing more about that. And I just, like I said, it sounds really gloomy, but it is something that I saw that I just wanted to share. So you're not caught off guard, or you're not surprised that you're starting to hear that. Not only that, but if you know someone who is probably going to need some extra interaction or engagement, like make this a time for you to just check in with them once a day. You don't have to spend the entire day with them on the phone or on the video call or whatever, but just check in with them, see how they're doing, call them and say, hey, I'm here if you want to talk. Hey, and one of the best ways to get people out of that funk is to give them another problem to solve. Because if people are sitting there just staring at themselves and just looking at how disgusting they feel about themselves or how much they can't stand the anguish in the world or whatever, sometimes giving them something else to distract them is a great way to shift their perspective and give them something to chew on. And even if it's just like say, hey, I heard about this thing, today, it's this book. I know that you like this, and it was a really interesting book and there was this argument about this and whatever. Like, just share the information, pass that on to them, because that may be a life-saving thing for them. So just give them something else to chew on, because that might be enough to keep them going. Okay. I do think that we are going to see a huge internet revolution over this, where information and sources and facts versus whatever is going to become a huge topic and theme in the next couple of years, 2-3 years actually. And I think that there are going to be a lot of laws put in place to protect the community, the internet community, from situations that put them at risk. And I think it's going to be kind of a mandate that's either going to be worked through government sources or going to be worked through the internet companies or websites, etc. But there's going to be a huge push to make sure that information, if it's coming from a factual source, that there are elements that have to be incorporated in the article or in the document. If they're not incorporated, you can't rely on it, or it's just hearsay. So there's a lot of these things there that are going to come into play there. I also think that entertainment, arts, all of that is going to boom over the next few years in an online way, streaming way, not so much with like networks and television. I think we're going to see, the network-based model where, you have a show on television, people show up, they are in the show, and there's commercials and they're selling their products. I think that has been on a kind of on a downward trend. I think they started to kind of come back up when they started to do more streaming-based services and all that other stuff. But still, just the traditional model for entertainment isn't going to be sustainable. So you're going to have a huge boost and increase in the amount of people who are very talented or have something unique to offer, and they just start to build that following. And the following is just going to create brands around these people. So some of these people who are extremely talented are just going to boom and blossom in this period. And those who are not, those who just are writing on their Instagram feed looking like an art piece, or they're, this or that looking a certain way, or them looking glamorous or zhuzhed up or whatever, that I think is going to start to decline. And we're going to see a lot more authenticity in programming and entertainment coming from this as well. So less fictional, fantasy-based stuff and more like real in the moment stuff that has more to do with like, what are you feeling? What are you experiencing from a first person perspective, or in that way? So a lot of these things. I also think that there's going to be a competitor to YouTube that probably will spring up during this period as well, for people who don't want to use YouTube as the tool for them to get themselves out there. So I think there's going to be a competitor that springs up, if not two, during this period that we may start to hear from. And we're going to be like, YouTube better watch out, because this company's coming for them. I also think that in some places, I don't think this may not be the whole country, but in some places, there's going to be some emergency bills that are passed to allow for relief of the population. So places that have certain types of restrictions on alcohol, or places that have restrictions on cannabis use or whatever, it's going to be essential for states and for communities to recoup the losses financially from this crisis and this crazy time. And a lot of these counties, a lot of these cities, a lot of these states are going to start to pass these bills in kind of a radical fashion to increase the revenue that can be brought. So any way to make more money or any way to increase revenue forms and sources is going to, I think it's going to begin to come forward, and you're going to start to hear about these weird passes. It may not be in the next few months. This may be within the next year or two, but I feel like there's going to be a lot more than what would have normally been. And you'll hear about the states that originally it was going to take two more years, and then they just randomly or suddenly pass it in the year without really any prior notice. So I think we're going to see more of that as well. Not only that, but I mean, people need relief, and when they're under that much strain and pressure, people need a little R&R, even if it's not R&R in the physical sense, but R&R in their heads. And of course, the people's go to R&R, if they're not finding healthier ways to cope, is by using alcohol or by using cannabis or using CBD, etc. Which honestly, I'm a huge proponent of using whatever nature provides for us, using that, as long as there isn't, as long as the cost isn't so high, using those things to bring relief to the world, bringing medicines and new ways of coping with stuff. I was just watching a piece this morning on the TV, and they were talking about these brothers who owned a cannabis business or industry, and they had started to produce CBD oils, and they had met this little girl, and at first they had joined this company. They became this company because they wanted to just create products for people to get high. But then once they met, they started to see a shift in their trajectory or the focus of the business, and they met this little girl who was suffering immensely from a lot of seizures and disorders. And when she started to use their products, she got better, and now she only has like 1 or 2 seizures a month. So it was a huge change for her. And now she's, the doctors gave her less than 5 years to live, and she's been around 10 more years. So she is a example of that. And I think that I'm a huge proponent of that, and using whatever the universe has given us to use, as long as the cost isn't too high. For me, using oil and fossil fuels, yes, we still need it because our economy depends on that. But I still think that the cost in the long run, the cost of us continuing to operate off of this mode is just too high. We're going to have to get onto a cleaner form of fuel that requires less damage to the planet, less risk to destabilization of our ecosystem. So that was just my opinion there. Let's see, another thing. Internet revolution, huge boost to online economy. Yeah, a lot of online businesses are going to spring up from this. You're going to find a lot of companies just suddenly springing up online, a lot of new businesses where there may be a lot of focus on the exchange of services. For example, like me, I'm a professional psychic medium. I have my own, website. I have my own online services. Everything that I do is online, actually. So more businesses like that. People who, have never been in business before suddenly want to be or have their own business. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that as well. We're also going to see a lot of charity or online charity-based organizations, nonprofits. And then I also think we're going to see a lot more of people who are doing love donations or donation-based businesses where they provide a service or they provide something, but they're receiving some sort of financial compensation from someone who wants to donate their money as well. So we're going to see a lot more of that as well. Another thing that I am seeing, I also think that we are going to see a lot more growth and people hiring, going to work for, actually we're going to see service-based work, big hiring boost percentage, meaning that if you're, if you've ever wanted to be a firefighter, if you ever wanted to be a doctor, if you ever wanted to be a politician, if you ever wanted to be a civil servant, if you ever wanted to work for a school, if you ever wanted to work for these essential service-based businesses are going to be go into like overdrive with hiring people because they are basically going to be paid for by the government. And there's going to be systems that start to link up a lot of the federal government and the local governments, and helping to increase the ability to have nurses and doctors and first responders and, police officers and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're going to see a lot more growth in those areas. So for those of you who would like to have a different job, or you might be forced to find a different job, that area is probably going to be a big area and an area where you might want to go ahead and apply to. Once they get themselves reorganized and coordinated, there's going to be a lot more money pumped to those services by mandate and by law. So there's a lot more opportunity for growth and for you to find work there. So that's another situation that might benefit you if you're going to be looking for a job after this. I also think that there's going to be big push for ongoing federal government base pay. I think there's going to be a much bigger push for the federal government base pay. In other words, people have been wondering, like $1,000 a month. I think the guy who was running for president, I forgot his name, but he was wanting to pay everybody $1,000 from the taxes that are paid by Amazon and these other big corporations and companies. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, I had to think about it, because you don't just give people money and think that they're going to do the best thing they can do with it, right? You want to make sure that if you're going to give somebody money, that they're going to use it in a way that it helps them or benefits them. If you give $1,000 to someone who suffers from a drug addiction, they're probably not going to spend it on their food or on their needed medicine or on their stay at a rehab center. They're probably going to go buy drugs with it, if that's what it is, because it's a huge temptation and it's not going to be easy for them to resist that. If someone is used to gambling, same thing. So giving people money is not the easiest simple thing to do. However, there are ways of implementing something like that where whatever you get from the government is basically going to ensure that you're stable, that you're okay, and that your basic needs are met. After that, it's on you. So I think that it would be more in a credit-based system where instead of just giving people money, you have certain credits that are allocated or go towards certain things. So if you want to have a certain health insurance, you get certain percentage of credits that go directly to that health insurance. And some of those credits are going to pay completely for your insurance. Some of those credits will pay for a partial insurance plan, and then you'll offset the rest of the costs based off of what you want. So I think that there's going to be kind of like a credit system that's going to come into play here. So it's not about just giving people money. It's about people having the ability to be stable and to sustain themselves with the amount of money that this government is being paid for by us taxpayers. There's a huge push that I think is going to come from this. It may not happen overnight, but I think over the next 3 to 5 years, we'll start to see a lot more of this being actual reality, and then us seeing a credit-based system that helps us with our basic elemental needs for certain things and services. So I see that coming in as well. I also think that the oil part, I for some reason, and I don't know why, and maybe because I have a lot of clients that are in Houston who work for the oil companies, but I feel like there's going to be some big partnership between Canada and the U.S. or Canada, U.S. and Mexico, where it's like an oil-based partnership. I don't know why though, and I was like, I don't know why the U.S. would want to partner up with Canada if the U.S. has that much oil or is producing that much oil or whatever. Like now that we have so much and we can't even sell it because China is also not even using their own oil and they need a lot of oil to survive. But no, it's hard to sell it to the market right now because no one's really needing it. The cars aren't being driven, factories aren't running as well or as much, and you have the need just having gone down exponentially. So I think and I don't know why, and this is the thing, I don't know. Sometimes when I tune into something or I see something psychically, I don't always understand the reasoning behind it. Sometimes I do, many times I do, because I can see the structure and why these pieces are together. But there are times when I'm tuning in psychically and I just don't understand why something happens the way it does. And I it's hard for me to, I can't explain it. And I'll be honest with the client. I'm like, look, I don't really know why I'm seeing this. It doesn't make sense to me based based off of like what would be normal under, normal circumstances, but this is what I'm seeing. And that's what happens. And people don't, like, okay, Ferny, whatever you say, it's that, I know you've said a lot of things in the past that have come true, but this might be one of those things you probably didn't get right, or Ferny, you probably didn't get this one, which happens too. I mean, it's not like I'm a 100% accuracy rate, but and then people will come back and say, so I thought this was absolutely not possible. And if you go to my reviews, you'll see enough people have said this over and over again. What he said, I thought was absolutely impossible. I just there was no way that's going to happen, or he must have been way off. And then it happens somehow. So whenever I sense something, even if I don't understand how something can happen, that's okay. I don't need to understand how. I just need to tune into the detail as much as possible so that at least I can kind of describe what it is I'm grasping or seeing. But I kept seeing this partnership between Canada and the U.S. as far as oil is concerned, or with resources like that. I don't know what that's supposed to be for, but that's another thing that I saw there as well. Also, another thing was the DNA database, an emergency demographic communications program is what I called it. That's what I named it. I don't know if that's going to be that name or not, but essentially, you've got a lot of people who've been doing DNA testing, trying to like find their roots and send their testing into these websites like Forever 23 and or I'm sorry, 23andMe. I'm thinking of Forever 21. I'm thinking of Forever 21 for 23andMe, and then also and speaking of Forever 21, so the white shirts that I wear every day, I got my shirt not from Forever 21, but I got it from H&M because I love H&M's, some of their designs and stuff. And this was like a really inexpensive shirt. And I was just trying to find stuff that was, going to be not that not that crazy expensive, but that I would be able to wear consistently. So people may say, Ferny, you wear the same outfit every day. I'm like, no, I wear the same designed shirt every day. Like I wear the same basic type of white shirt with these like little like things on the sleeves there. And so last year, I was looking for something that I could just wear on the camera because I don't want to think about what I have to wear every single day. That's me trying to minimize the distractions in my life, minimize the things that really I shouldn't be putting my energy into, and focus on the things that really matter. And so I saw this at a H&M when I went shopping, and I was like, I love that shirt, and it fits so well. So I bought one, and I got one that was bigger size, but I, got one, and then I went online and I ordered like 20 of them because I was like, I need to buy a lot, because if H&M doesn't make them anymore, or they're out of business at some point, I need to have enough backup so that if I end up, ripping one, or one doesn't make it through the wash, then I'm not going to have any more. And then I'm going to be like, oh, great. Now I got to find another white shirt that I think I like a lot, enough. And it's just a basic white shirt. It's not like it's like this is not fashion. This is comfort and flexibility and just a representation of what I'm doing. So for me, this works. You don't like my fashion? Too bad. You don't have to like my fashion. I don't need you to like my fashion. But for me, this is what I needed for myself. So I bought 20 of these, and then I unknowingly bought like 20 of the size that was too small back when I was bigger. So I said, crap, I need these, bigger size. So I ordered 20 more of the bigger ones, and I was going to donate the ones that I bought, the 20 that it was smaller that I bought, because I'd already washed them and everything. And I was like, I'm not going to send them back. So I was going to donate them to someone who needed clothing, but then I lost weight, and I'm like, cool, I've like doubled my stock. So I've got like 40 of these white shirts. So I wash them in cycles. So it's like every week I go through like the 20, but of course so I only wash them every 2 weeks. But anyways, they last me, and they're going to last me for some time to come until they finally at some point fall apart or whatever. But just that mindset, those little thoughts like that I had all last year and this year about something may not be around. I need to be prepared in case it's not. So that way I don't have to worry about, oh crap, they don't make this anymore, or they don't have this anymore. So I was already thinking about this last year. Now, I didn't know at the time when I was having these thoughts and this intuitive push to do certain things that the reason why was because of what's going on right now. I didn't know at the time that was the reason. I just knew that I needed 20 of these because if they stop making them or they go out of business, then, and there's been no news about H&M going out of business. I know Forever 21 has had news, but not H&M, but that's the mindset. So that's your intuition kicking in and telling you like, you might want to do this because of this, et cetera, et cetera. So another interesting thing. And what I was talking about, the DNA database, because you're like, Ferny, you totally got off the DNA database. So there's going to be a lot of push to have everyone's DNA on some sort of system. Now, there's going to be a lot of pushback on this because people are going to say, hell no, I'm not going to give the government my DNA. I'm not going to, that's privacy, et cetera, et cetera. However, something that we're going to learn from just this is that not everyone is going to be affected the same way. And even though we have a percentage of the population that is at the highest risk of getting the virus and becoming very ill that they need to be hospitalized, it's what they're going to start to see is that some people, for some reason, were affected that were not in the high risk category, and they needed to find out why. And what I think they're going to start to realize is that there was a DNA component to this virus where certain people who had certain genetic markers were more at risk to the virus. So in order to help people who are at highest risk avoid future situations where they're thinking that they're going to be fine and they're healthy and they're young, suddenly get the virus and then go into, cardiac arrest or whatever within a day. I think there's going to be a huge push to have a national DNA database system. So for those of us who would be at high risk or who have certain markers that make us higher risk, we would automatically receive some sort of notification or something that says, it's almost like the emergency national broadcast system on your phone, but this would be you need to know you are this statistic in this category, you are at the highest risk, and this is what you need to do, because it would help to delay the fatalities and help to reduce the amount of people that wouldn't have exposed themselves in the particular potential situation. Not only that, but for future testing as well with the population, because our medicine, even though we have some of the most advanced medicine systems in the world and technology, we're really not using it to its capacity to help the human race. On a personal level, yeah, you can probably go through cancer treatment, and it's one of the most advanced cancer treatments in the world. But what are we doing as a country? What are we doing as a system, as a world system to help better humanity's future health, to help our kind with the best health possible? So I think that there's going to be a database there. Not only that, but it's also going to be a requirement if you're going to register for the national health plan that they're going to roll out as well. It's not going to be like Medicaid for all. It's going to be something a little bit different, but it's like a national health plan for a certain bracket of people. So I think that's also going to kick into gear, but it's going to be a requirement to help with the statistics and all the analysis, and also to help the medical community to be ahead of the game if this happens again. I also think that the higher rate of spam and hacking online is going to grow exponentially within the next few months as well during the midst of the pandemic, because I think that people who are hackers are going to have a lot more time to hack. And I think that they are going to be using that opportunity to exploit if they are those kinds of people. So I think that we're going to see a lot more of that as well. So we're going to start seeing these companies popping up where they're they're data security companies, where basically right now, you can use Apple's system, the cloud, or you can use the Android system, the cloud, or whatever. Some of us use Dropbox because that's a different alternative system, and you don't need to have any of those products to have that. So it's kind of like a third party. But we're going to have these data protection services where it's almost like a go-between. So for example, if I want to sign in to let's say a certain program or a certain whatever online, it's an online thing, or I want to use let's say Facebook for whatever, and they're asking me to validate or to prove myself, I basically would have everything registered with this company that is like the Fort Knox of digital data protection. So they are they're like the credit system, but for security and for validation. They basically validate our identity, and we're either who we say we are or we're not. So if I'm gonna, if Facebook says I need your credentials, they basically connect with this company, and this company's thing, their stamp or their confirmation gives someone like Facebook the opportunity to go ahead and let us use their service without actually having to give them any of our data. So we're going to start seeing a lot of these data companies that are data security systems and protection services for people who just don't want to share their stuff anymore and don't trust companies like Facebook or like whatever to give data. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that as well in the next few years. There is going to be a national free library system that is going to also, I think, come into play where it's almost like a national library system based on some of the premise of Amazon, but there will be like writers and people who are, it's almost like taking Amazon and the old walk-in library system, but it's all going to be online. And then also having so taking Amazon, the free library system, because it'll free, and there'll be different tiers. There'll be the free version of it. There'll be the tier 1, tier 2, whatever, and it depends on the cost or whatever. And then you also have TED Talks. So TED Talks, Amazon, and a national library system, kind of putting them all together. And so you'll have people who are writers who are going to be guests as, online lectures and all this other stuff going through the system online. It's going to be incredible. I think that's actually be a really incredible thing and get people back into the art of writing as well. Not only that, but it'll also be based around the idea of, if you're not a reader, we can offer you a way for you to still get the information that's in this book, but in a different form. Or there will be someone who walks you or talks to you about that chapter or whatever. So there's going to be a lot more online information and data and book-based knowledgeable systems like that. So I see more of that as well. The last thing that I saw, and if I see anything else, I'll post it, but the last thing I saw was I saw the military also getting way more funding, and I saw that the need for more boots and more surgeons and more people working within the military industrial complex, and it's more of the military complex where the bases and the Peace Corps, all these different areas of military government where you have people. There's going to be a huge push to grow that as well. Not only that, but we're actually going to come to realize that a lot of the funding and money for some of these programs has been more focused on weapons development and on sustaining and supporting systems within the government that don't actually help the country, except for the benefit of the military growing its power or the military growing its influence in the world. So it's almost more of a, it's like, instead of using the money that we put towards military to help us to strengthen the chessboard, let's spend all the money on this one chess piece. Like that's what we're going to realize, that we're really centric and focused on that. So that's going to start to kind of pull back a little bit, and a lot more emphasis on emergency systems, FEMA being incorporated or being used or taken into the military complex. So all these things are going to be switched up a little bit. This isn't going to happen overnight, of course. All these things that I'm talking about, I think that this is going to be slow moving. Some of these things may happen really quickly. Some of it's going to take years, but I think there's going to be a huge push in military recruitment programs and a huge push in that, but also realizing that we haven't done enough to protect and to help our own people, our own country, the people who support those systems, those organizations, and they should be the first on the list to be protected, to be helped, to be saved, not by developing weapons, but by developing self-sustaining support systems when the need arises. It's a big push on that. So I hope that has helped you guys out understand what I've been seeing, what I've been feeling. I might do another one of these as I get more insights over the next few years as well. So, but this is just a start, so you guys have an idea of what might be rolling down the pipeline. And if you already see some of these pieces, then you have an idea. Okay, maybe he's right. Maybe I need to start looking at this as an option. Or hey, he said this, so maybe this might help me, give me an edge or whatever. But I love you all, and thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then like, share, and review my show on your favorite podcast listening platform. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and for more information about myself and the work that I do, check out my website at www.fernandomarron.com. Till next time, kiddos, and be sure to have yourselves a namaste.